On the morning of the 2nd of July, in a stone hall in Scotland, a young woman crossed a stage in a black gown and shook her hand, the way tens of thousands of graduates do every summer. It was a grey and unremarkable morning on the cold edge of the North Sea. Students in their gowns and their families in their good coats, a little nervous, a little proud. And then a voice read her name into the microphone. Not her title, her name. Louise Mountbatten-Windsor. No lady in front of it. No Royal Highness. Just the name a working graduate carries, called out the same as the students who walked before her and the students who walked after. She is the late Queen's youngest granddaughter. She is 17th in line to the British throne. And on the proudest morning of her young life, the palace let her be called by a name that hid all of that, on purpose. Stop for a moment on that place in the line, because it is stranger than it sounds. 17th is close enough that she is unmistakably of the blood, a grandchild of the sovereign who reigned for 70 years, and far enough that she will almost certainly never come near the throne itself. It is a curious spot to be born into, near the summit and yet safely off to the side, royal beyond any doubt, and yet free, in a way the first few in that line will never be, to become almost anything she chooses. Most people in that position spend their lives leaning toward the crown, closing the distance, making sure the world remembers exactly how close to it they stand. Her parents did the reverse. They took a child born near the top of the most exclusive list in the country and spent 18 years teaching her to live as though the list did not exist. Two of the parents in that hall were a prince and a duchess. Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, sat there, like any other mother and father, watching their daughter walk. And afterward, the palace shared a handful of photographs on its official account, which for this young woman is a rare thing indeed. You can see the ordinary pride of it in those images, the parents in their neat clothes, the daughter in cap and gown, the private smile of a family on a day that means everything and looks like nothing. In most of those pictures, you have to look twice to be sure which of the graduates she is, because there is nothing about her that asks to be looked at first. There is no ribbon of rank across her gown, no separate carriage, no roped-off row. She sat where the students sit, and rose when the students rise. And the only thing that marked her out was that two of the faces in that crowd were faces the whole country would know. I want you to sit with how strange that is. Because in the same country, in the very same week, a different branch of this family was busy with something else entirely. One royal duke has spent this summer watching his name scraped off the city, door by door, letter by letter. Another royal son flew home and walked into a courtroom he had spent years trying to reach, and walked out, having lost. The succession is shaking. The scandal is loud. The cameras are pointed, as they always are, at the wreckage. And meanwhile, quietly, in a Scottish university town, a young woman finished a 4-year degree, stood up when her plain name was called, and became the thing her parents decided long ago that she would be. Ordinary. Trained to work. Kept, deliberately, out of the story. Today I want to tell you the story of the quiet branch. the one that raised a princess to live like she wasn't one. Because there is a cost to that choice, and there is a shelter in it. And this week, you could see both at once. We have spent this whole decade learning what the crown does to the people who hold it too tightly. We have watched titles become weapons and then become millstones. We have watched a family tear at itself over exactly which words go in front of which name. So when one child in that same family is sent out into the world with the crown deliberately left off, that is not a footnote. That is the family, or at least one corner of it, quietly admitting what it has learned. Let me take you back to the decision, because the moment on that stage was set in motion years ago. When Louise was born in 2003, she came into everything the machine could give her. Her father is Prince Edward, the late Queen's youngest son. Her mother is Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. By the ordinary rules of the house, Louise was entitled from birth to be styled with the letters that open every door in Britain. Her Royal Highness, Princess. The words that mean you never wait, never queue, never pay, never fetch your own coat. Those words are not decoration in this family. They are the load-bearing wall of the whole structure. And Louise had them by right of blood from the day she drew breath. Her parents chose not to use them. This is not a rumour, and it is not a reading. Sophie said it plainly in an interview with The Times 6 years ago. Her words were that they tried to bring the children up with the understanding that they are very likely to have to work for a living. She said the titles were there, that the children could decide to use them from the age of 18, but that she thought it highly unlikely they would. Read that again, because it is the whole episode in one sentence. Very likely to have to work for a living. A royal mother, married to the Queen's son, sitting on a title her daughter could claim any day she wanted, saying out loud that the plan was a job. And notice the exact shape of it. She did not say the titles were forbidden. She said they were there, waiting, and that the child could pick them up at 18 if she wished. The door was left open, and the whole plan was built on trusting the child, once grown, to walk past it. There is a quiet confidence in that. A parent betting on the character they had spent 18 years building, rather than locking the door and hoping. And that is precisely what happened. When Louise turned 18, the age at which she could have picked up the Royal Highness and worn it for the rest of her life, she let it lie there, untouched. She kept the courtesy title of Lady, which comes with being an Earl's daughter, and she left the crown part of the name in the drawer. Think about what it takes to leave a thing like that lying there. Most of us, offered the single most valuable word in the country, free, for life, ours by birth, would take it and never look back. It costs nothing to accept, and it changes everything about how a room treats you. She was 18. She was old enough to understand exactly what she was declining. And she declined it not in a fit of rebellion, not to make a point, but quietly, the way you leave a coat you have decided you do not need. The refusal made no headlines at the time because it was designed not to. That is the tell. A gesture made for an audience is loud. This one was almost silent, and it was not only the name they kept back. For years, the family itself was kept back. While the rest of the royals filled the balcony at every anniversary and rode in the carriages at every state occasion, the Edinburgh household stayed at the edge of the picture. There were long stretches where you simply did not see the two children at all. No round of magazine covers, no carefully placed photographs. They made a decision most modern celebrities would find impossible, which was to make their children less visible on purpose in a world that rewards the opposite at every turn. They did the same with their son, James, who for years carried the courtesy title Viscount Seven rather than anything grander, raised on the same plain plan. And look at what that quiet discipline looked like from the outside, year after year. When the family gathered on the balcony for the great set pieces, the trooping of the colour, the jubilees, the anniversaries that filled the front pages, the two Edinburgh children were mostly not the ones the lenses hunted for. They were there, and then they were not. Folded back into an ordinary school term, an ordinary summer, a life the papers had almost nothing to print about, because almost nothing was offered. In an age when a single well-placed photograph of a royal child can be worth a fortune, and when the pressure to feed that appetite never lets up, a mother and father inside the actual royal house chose, again and again, to give the machine nothing to feed on. That is not the absence of a strategy. That is the strategy, held quietly for the better part of 2 decades, in the face of every incentive to do the opposite. You have to understand how against the grain that runs. Every instinct of the modern age says to cash in the fame while you have it. Put the child on the cover. Let the title do the lifting. And here were 2 members of the actual royal house with the strongest brand on earth behind them, choosing to spend that brand down to almost nothing where their children were concerned. That takes a kind of discipline that is very hard to hold to for 18 straight years, when the easier path, the grander title, the glossier photograph, is sitting right there for the taking. And when the whole world would forgive you for reaching for it. Now here is what the camera on that graduation morning did not explain. When you hear that a royal was raised, quote, normally, it sounds like a soft thing, a nice bit of parenting. It is not soft. For 70 years, this institution has run on a single fuel, and that fuel is the title. The whole architecture of the monarchy is a ladder of names. Who is a princess and who is only a lady? Who is a royal highness and who lost it? Where you stand in the line, who bows to whom? Whose children are photographed and whose are kept back? The scandals that have torn this family apart in the last decade have almost all been arguments about exactly that. Who keeps the name? Who is stripped of it? Whose door still has the crown on it? And into that machine, the parents of Louise decided to raise a child who would not need the machine at all. That is the payoff, hiding inside the plain name on the stage. It was not an accident of a quiet family. It was a strategy. Give the child a name she can survive without, so that when the storms come, and in this family they always come, she has somewhere to stand that no committee and no Act of Parliament can take away from her. A job, a degree, a surname that works at a cash register as well as it works at a palace. Which brings me to the cash register. Because there really was one. In the summer before she left for university, in the year she sat her final school exams, Louise took a job. Not a ceremonial patronage, not a charity photo call. A part-time job at a garden centre, working the till, serving customers several days a week after her exams were finished. The Queen's granddaughter, bringing up plant pots and bags of compost for people who mostly had no idea whose hand was giving them their change. She was of the age where she could have reached for the Royal Highness and never done a day's ordinary work again. Instead, she stood at a till, learning what most people learn young, which is that money comes from hours, and that the hours can be long. Think about the two images side by side, because this is the power of the whole thing. On one side, a young woman at a till in a garden centre, in an apron, counting out coins. On the other, 17th in line to the throne of the United Kingdom. The same person, in the same summer. That is not a contradiction her parents fell into. That is a contradiction they built, on purpose, brick by brick, so that the girl would know the weight of an ordinary hour before she ever felt the weight of a crown. And there is something almost tender in the ordinariness of that particular job. Not an internship arranged by a foundation, not a season shadowing a charity for the cameras. Compost and seed trays and people in Wellington boots on a Saturday morning. None of them looking twice at the polite young woman on the till. For a few weeks, one of the most protected young people in the country got to be nobody in particular. And by every account, she wanted exactly that. There is a kind of freedom in being unrecognised that most of this family will never taste. And her parents handed it to her deliberately, dressed up as a summer job. And notice when it happened. Not as a small child, when a photograph of a royal toddler on a till would have been merely cute. She did it as a young woman, on the very threshold of adulthood. In the same season, she sat the exams that would decide her university. At the exact moment, she could instead have stepped fully into the royal machine and let it carry her. She chose the till. Or rather, her parents built a world in which choosing the till felt natural to her, which is the harder and quieter kind of parenting, the kind that does not announce itself. A summer of ordinary shifts is not a headline. It is a foundation being poured, out of sight, under a life that would need it later. Now the institution enters the story, the way it always does. And here is where the tension comes in. Because you cannot raise a royal to be ordinary without raising a hard question underneath it. If the title is worth so little that you send your daughter to a garden centre till, then what exactly is the family selling to the rest of us? And if the title is worth so much that stripping it from a disgraced uncle takes an Act of Parliament and a king's letter, then how do you tell a daughter it does not matter which name they call from the stage? The answer, as far as anyone can tell from the record, is that the name matters enormously. And that is precisely why you must be able to live without it. The ones who were destroyed in this family were destroyed by clinging to the name after the substance had gone. A dukedom held like a life raft, a style defended in court. The parents of Louise looked at all of that and chose the opposite. Build the person first. Let the title be a coat she can take off. And before we go further, hold this one image in your mind, because it is the whole story in a single frame, and we will come back to it. A young woman, 17th in line to the throne of the United Kingdom, standing at a garden centre till in an apron, handing a stranger their change. Keep that picture. Everything else in this story is a way of explaining how it came to exist, and why it may turn out to matter more than any crown in the room. And this summer, in the space of a single week, you could see the whole design tested in public. The timing here is not a reading, it is a calendar. In the same days that Louise was preparing to graduate, King Charles was in Scotland for Royal Week. There was the Thistle service at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. The King and the Queen and the Prince of Wales in the deep green velvet robes of Scotland's oldest order of chivalry. The whole heavy machinery of the crown on display. Every step of it about rank, about who belongs to the circle and who stands outside the rope. Nobody puts on green velvet and an ancient collar of gold to be ordinary. It is the monarchy showing itself to be exactly what it is, a system of names and precedents, beautiful and immovable. A thing that says out loud that some people are set apart and always will be. And the point is not that one of these things is right and the other wrong. The point is that they were happening in the same country, in the same week, under the same family name, pointing in opposite directions. The green velvet in the cathedral, the plain gown on the stage. Both of them true. Both of them this family, and around all of it, the family's slow-burning crisis kept burning. Think about the two other stories running that very week, because they are the dark frame this bright little graduation sits inside. One royal duke, once among the most senior of the late Queen's line to carry a great dukedom, has spent this summer watching that name quietly stripped away, the Royal Highness gone, the styling reduced. His very presence being edited out of buildings and rolls and lists across the country. A man who clung to the name long after the substance had drained out of it, and who is now paying for it in public, one erasure at a time. And on the other side of the family, another of the late Queen's grandsons flew back to Britain this month and walked into the courtroom he had spent years and a fortune trying to reach. A fight against the press that had once hunted his own mother, and walked out of it on the losing side, with the costs still to be argued at the end of the month. And I want to be careful and fair about both of those men, because this channel does not kick people while they are down, and does not pretend to know more than the record shows. I am not going to narrate anyone's private guilt or settle a case the courts have not settled. I am only pointing at what is plainly on the public record. One royal duke is having his styling and his standing quietly reduced, his name edited out of places that once carried it. Another royal son brought a case to court this month, and the court ruled against him, with the argument over who pays the enormous costs still to come at the end of the month. Those are the facts, and they are enough. What matters for this story is not the detail of either man's troubles. It is the single thread that runs through both. That the loudest pain in this family, again and again, gathers around one thing: the name. Who holds it? Who is losing it? Who is fighting over the right to it? Hold those two men in your mind. One diminished by defending a name he would not let go of. One in a long, grinding fight, partly about who controls the story of a family name. That is the weather. That is the family Louise belongs to. 2 of its men spent this summer locked in battles over names, one losing his by erasure, and one losing in a courtroom, while the youngest of them crossed a stage under the plainest name in the room, and it was almost the only peaceful thing the house did all week. And a short drive and a world away, the quiet monarchy was doing something the loud one cannot do. It was graduating in the same university town where the Prince and Princess of Wales once met as students. St Andrews, the ancient grey university on the cold edge of the North Sea, is where a young Prince William met a young Catherine Middleton more than 20 years ago. 2 students who would one day be crowned. There is a strange symmetry in that. The same salt air, the same cobbled streets, the same old grey stone that has watched students come and go for 600 years. And this family keeps sending its children there, back to the one place where a royal can, for a few years, be simply a student among students. William went and found a future queen. Louise went and found a degree and an open door. And now another child of this family has passed through those same walls, only her exit points in the opposite direction. William walked out of St Andrews and into the machinery of the crown, toward the throne itself. Louise walked out of St Andrews this month and, by all accounts, straight into a gap year and an ordinary open future. A degree in one hand and no title in the other. The same grey stones, the same cold sea air, and 2 lives pointed at opposite ends of the same family. And the subject she chose says something too. She read for a degree in English, 4 years of essays and reading and argument, the sort of unshowy work that no title can do for you and that no one can hand you for your name. You cannot inherit a degree. You cannot have it conferred by an Act of Parliament. You sit the exams, you write the essays, and at the end, a plain name is read from a stage. Of everything this family could give a child, that is one of the very few things it cannot simply give. She had to go and get it. 4 years of it, in a cold northern town, far from the balconies and the cameras, doing the ordinary hard work that every other student in that hall was doing beside her. Then comes the old echo, the moment from the past that changes how you see the present one. Because there is one more thing about that graduation week, and it reaches back to a grave. The award that Louise received that same week at the palace of Holyrood House, handed to her by her own father, was the Duke of Edinburgh's Gold Award. It carries the name of her grandfather, Prince Philip, who created it. This year marked the 70th anniversary of that scheme, which has quietly shaped millions of young lives across the world, most of whom will never wear a title of any kind. A father handing his daughter an award that carries his own father's name, in the summer of that scheme's 70th year, in the same days her plain name was read from a graduation stage. 3 generations of the family are pressed into that single moment. The grandfather who built the thing, the father who carries it forward and handed it across, and the granddaughter receiving it, having done the actual work the award demands, the expeditions and the volunteering and the skills that any teenager anywhere in the world can put in. Because that is what the Gold Award is. It was designed by Prince Philip to reward exactly the qualities no title can supply. persistence, service, the willingness to be cold and tired and to keep going. There is a neatness to it that no palace planner could have staged. And think about what that award actually asks of a young person. It is not given for who your family is. It cannot be. It is given for months and months of unglamorous effort. The long walks in bad weather, the hours volunteering where no camera goes, the slow mastery of some skill that nobody handed you. A teenager in a council estate and a granddaughter of the late Queen earn it by doing the same tired, cold, patient work. That was Philip's whole idea, and it is a quietly radical one for a man in his position. That character is built the same way in everyone, by effort, by service, by sticking at a hard thing when it would be easier to stop. And it is worth remembering just how far that idea has travelled. Millions of young people across scores of countries have earned that award over the 70 years since a prince consort dreamed it up. And the overwhelming majority of them will never hold a title, never see the inside of a palace, never be anything the newspapers would call important. They earned it the same way Louise did. One cold expedition and one quiet act of service at a time. So when the granddaughter of a queen collects the very same certificate that a teenager on an ordinary street collects, judged by the very same standard, that is not a coincidence of scheduling. It is the whole philosophy of this branch of the family, made visible in a single handshake between a father and a daughter. Of all the things a prince could have left behind, he left behind a scheme that measures young people by what they do, rather than who they are. And here was his own granddaughter, 3 generations down, collecting it from her father's hand, and the connection runs deeper than the certificate. Of all the grandchildren, Louise is the one who took up Philip's own passion. When he died, in 2021, he left her his carriage and 2 of his fell ponies. Not a jewel, not a house. A carriage and 2 ponies, and a difficult sport that takes years of unglamorous practice in the cold and the mud. And this was not a hobby she picked up to honour him after he was gone. She had already started competing in the sport years before his death, as a young teenager, learning the reins and the timing, and the sheer physical patience it takes to drive a team of ponies through a course. The inheritance did not make her a driver. It found her already being one. Long before there was anything to inherit, a teenage girl was already out in the cold, spending her weekends on the thing her grandfather loved, for no reason, except that she loved it too. And the following year, at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, she drove one of his carriages out in front of her grandmother, the late Queen, one of the last public images of the 2 of them in the same frame. An elderly queen, near the end of her long life, watching her youngest granddaughter drive the late Prince Philip's own carriage and ponies, the sport he loved, carried forward by the one grandchild who chose to carry it. Sit with that picture for a moment, because it is a rare kind of inheritance made visible. A crowd, a spring afternoon at Windsor, an old queen in the stands, and a young woman guiding a team of the dead prince's own ponies around a course he used to drive himself. Nobody wrote that scene. It was not arranged for a documentary. It simply happened. Because a grandfather and a granddaughter had, quite separately and years apart, fallen in love with the same hard, patient sport. And then he died, and left it to the one person in the family already living it. Grief in this family usually shows up as an empty chair. This time, it showed up as a full carriage, moving, and that tells you almost everything about this branch of the family. Prince Philip came to carriage driving late, in his 50s, after he had to give up polo, and he threw himself into it with the seriousness of a professional, still driving a team of ponies into his 80s, helping turn a small pastime into a proper international sport. A prince consort who spent his spare hours mastering something hard, cold, and entirely unglamorous, for no reason except that the work itself was worth doing. That is the man who put the reins in Louise's hands. And of all the treasures a family like this could pass down, of all the tiaras and the estates and the styles, what came to her was the sport, the ponies, and the example. She did not inherit the crown of that generation. She inherited its work ethic. A young woman who would rather be judged on how well she handles a carriage in the mud than on where she stands in a line of succession. And think about the shape of that particular inheritance. Because it is the opposite of everything this family usually hands down. A great estate makes you richer while you sleep. A title works for you the moment it is spoken. A jewel sits in a vault and gains value doing nothing at all. What Louise was left is the one kind of inheritance that is worthless unless you get up early and go and do the work. A carriage rots in a barn if no one drives it. 2 ponies are a burden, not a gift, to anyone unwilling to be out in the cold before dawn to feed and harness and train them. Her grandfather did not leave her a thing that would carry her. He left her a thing she would have to carry. And she had already been carrying it, gladly, for years before it was ever hers. Of all the ways to say what kind of person a family hopes a child becomes, that is about the clearest. Not, here is something that will make your life easy. Here is something that will only reward you if you are willing to work. Now let me be fair to the other side, because there is a real objection here, and it deserves a fair hearing. Someone will say this is a story the palace loves to tell about itself. The humble royal, the princess with a summer job. That it is a kind of performance, as deliberate as the green velvet robes in Edinburgh. And that a young woman who is genuinely 17th in line to the throne is never truly ordinary, no matter what name they read out. And there is truth in that. She is not ordinary. She grew up with a security detail somewhere in the background and a grandmother in a palace. And no garden centre shift erases that. It would be dishonest to pretend the shelter she was given is available to the people watching this. Most young people who work a till do so because they must, not because a wise parent arranged it as a lesson, with a palace and a title waiting safely in reserve. But watch what happens when you place the dates beside the objection. Sophie said those words about working for a living 6 years ago, long before the family's current storms. The choice not to use the Royal Highness was made when Louise was a child, at a time when it would have cost the family nothing to hand her the full styling and let her shine. They gave it up early, before there was any scandal to hide behind, before it was fashionable to look modest. The strategy was in place before the storm it now protects her from. That is not stage management after the fact. That is a bet the parents placed years ahead of time, and this summer, it paid. And if this were pure performance, you would expect it to be loud. The garden centre job paraded in a glossy interview, the modesty turned into a brand. Instead, the opposite happened. For years, there was near silence around these children. The palace so rarely comments on Louise that when it shared a few graduation photographs this month, that was itself a small event. A performance seeks the camera. This looked far more like a family that would genuinely rather you looked away. So here is the cost. Because there is always a cost. And this channel does not pretend otherwise. Louise stands slightly outside her own family's story. She is not a working royal. She does not have the platform, the patronages, the machine behind her that a princess would have. Whatever she does next, she does mostly on her own, with a degree and a plain name and the ordinary uncertainty that comes with them. The shelter and the exile are the same wall. To be protected from the machine is also to be left out of it. She will not have the doors opened, the diary filled, the lifelong purpose handed down that a full Royal Highness receives. Freedom and obligation are two sides of one coin, and in giving her the one, her parents necessarily withheld the other. There is a loneliness in that worth naming honestly. To be raised at the edge of the most famous family on earth is to belong to it and not quite belong to it at once. She will always be the late Queen's granddaughter, and she will never quite be a royal in the way her cousins are. She carries the name at the airport and the scrutiny that comes with it, but not the platform that is supposed to make the scrutiny worthwhile. That is a narrow and unusual place to stand, and no summer job fully prepares you for it. The gift her parents gave her is real. So is the strange, in-between position it leaves her in for the rest of her life. And there is a quieter cost, the one the family will feel over time. The monarchy needs working members, and it has been shrinking for years, its ranks thinning, its scandals hollowing it out from the inside. Andrew is gone from the front of it. Harry is across an ocean. The king has been treated for cancer and is not a young man. And here is a healthy, capable, university-educated granddaughter of the late Queen, raised so thoroughly to be independent that she may never step fully into the ranks the institution is desperate to fill. For decades, the great fear inside the palace was too many royals, and the answer was to slim the family down. But you can slim it too far. And now the very children who were raised most carefully to be self-sufficient are precisely the ones with the least obligation to come back and fill the gaps. Louise owes the institution nothing. That was the gift. It may also, one day, be the institution's problem. So here is the legacy of the 2nd of July, the thing worth carrying away. While one branch of this family spends the summer having its name scraped off theatres and struck from rolls, and another branch fights the press through the courts and loses. The quietest branch sent a daughter across a stage under a name that carried none of the weight and none of the wounds. Louise Mountbatten-Windsor. The name of a working graduate. The name a mother chose for her on purpose, so that whatever happened to the family, the girl would have somewhere solid to stand. The others inherited the titles and, in some cases, the ruin that came with defending them. She inherited a carriage, 2 ponies, an award for ordinary children, and a surname she can live on. My read is that of everything handed down in this family this decade, that may turn out to be the richest inheritance of all. Precisely because no committee, no letter, and no Act of Parliament can ever take it away. You can strip a man of his Royal Highness. You can edit his name off a building. But you cannot ungive a young woman the years she spent learning to be a person before she was ever asked to be a symbol. Where you will see this again is not on a balcony, and probably not soon. That is rather the point of her. But watch the shape of this family over the next few years as it decides who it needs and who it has already let go. Watch whether the granddaughter, raised to work for a living, is ever quietly asked to step in after all, and whether, having been given the freedom to say no, she chooses to say yes. That may be the truest test of the whole experiment. Not whether she can live without the crown, but whether, offered it, she still wants her ordinary life more. And now I would like to hear from you. If you raised your own children, or watched your parents raise you, you know how hard it is to give a young person less on purpose when you could so easily give them everything. Think about the plainest gift you were ever handed, the one that looked like nothing at the time, the job you did not want, the thing you were made to earn, and how it turned out to be the thing that held when everything showier fell away. Do you think the Edinburghs got it right, teaching a princess to live without the crown? Or did they leave her stranded between 2 worlds, ordinary enough to work a till, royal enough that she never quite will be? Tell me below where you stand, and tell me who in your own family was raised to expect nothing and turned out to be the strong one of them all.